Hi everyone, this is Dr. Heather Austin Robillard, and this lecture video is going to be over orthorexia nervosa. Although orthorexia nervosa is not recognized as a DSM-5 eating disorder full threshold, awareness about orthorexia has been on the rise. It was coined in 1998 by Dr. Braitman as the health food junkie disorder. Orthorexia nervosa means that there's an obsession with healthy foods. It comes from the Greek term orthos, which means straight and proper, and orexia, which means appetite. ON, or orthorexia nervosa, is a pathological obsession for biologically pure food. Although being aware and health conscious about your food is not necessarily a problem, however, people with orthorexia become fixated on the food that they put in their body, and they actually inadvertently cause damage to their mental health and to their body. Food intake is highly restrictive. There's no herbicides, pesticides, and artificial substances. They worry in excess about how food is manufactured. They can be vegetarians, vegans, fruitarians, raw food eaters. Because it's not included in the DSM, and there's actually very little research available currently, most of the research that has been conducted has been in Europe. In fact, there's some preliminary data out of Spain that shows maybe 0.5 to 1% of the population struggle with orthorexic behaviors. A study in Turkey also indicated that medical professionals and medical students may be the most at risk because they're constantly inundated with information about healthy eating and healthy food. We do know that it affects both men and women comparably. Some of the common behaviors that are found in individuals who struggle with orthorexia are an excessive worry and obsession over their food. It may take them up to 3 hours to plan for each meal. They have ritualistic eating, so maybe eating things in a certain way, and they have extreme restriction. They also tend to feel guilt and shame when they're not eating something that they deem as clean. They also have an obsession over what unclean food may be doing to their body. And they tend to refuse to eat away from home due to the impurities of food in outside places. Without a formal criteria in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it is difficult to get an estimate of how common orthorexia nervosa is. Based on Dr. Braitman's studies, these are some of the criteria that were researched to identify somebody who struggles with orthorexia nervosa. They may invest 3 or more hours each day planning, finding, preparing, eating, and concentrating on food. They tend to have a feeling of superiority to others whose diets are not what they deem as pure. There's a rigid adherence to an eating regimen. Any faults or shortcomings are followed with compensatory action, usually fasting or additional restrictions. They associate self-esteem with adherence to their diet, and the converse, associating a lack of adherence with self-loathing, disgust, and guilt. They are centrally focused not on their weight or appearance, but on eating properly and how the food is impacting their physical body. And they have an intolerance for others' food beliefs, and they spend excessive amounts of money relative to their income on foods because of their perceived pure quality. Health impairments due to nutritional imbalance or malnutrition, and severe distress and social impairment interfere with their function in social, academic, and vocational settings. Here's some common characteristics of those who struggle with orthorexia nervosa. Some of the personality traits may be similar to those with other types of eating disorders like anorexia nervosa, including rigidity, perfectionism, a need for control, intense anxiety around food, and hypochondria. They tend to believe that they're an expert in nutrition, they know what is in everything, and they refuse to mix nutrients due to perceived health consequences. Dr. Braitman also came up with a test in order to screen for orthorexia. It includes questions like, do you spend more than 3 hours a day thinking about your diet? Do you plan your meals several days ahead? Have you given up food you used to enjoy in order to eat the right kind of food? Do you feel guilty when you stray from your diet? Do you feel at peace with yourself and in total control when you eat healthily? As with the other eating disorders, there are, of course, consequences to your physical or mental health. Individuals with ON might have biopsychosocial consequences. This includes the biological, psychological, and social components of our life. Diet becomes their most important part of their life. They end up losing social relationships or affective dissatisfactions. They tend to struggle with some malnutrition because of the types of food they put in their body. They end up struggling with osteoporosis or bone loss and can even be impacted with certain heart problems. They also struggle with similar health issues commonly associated with anorexia nervosa or any other kind of restrictive eating disorders. And they can even end up dying from this disorder. Some people in the field debate on whether orthorexia is just another example of anorexia nervosa or maybe even a subtype. So let's look at some of the comparisons. How is orthorexia similar to anorexia? They both have obsessive thoughts, they distress around food, including experiencing depression and anxiety. They experience guilt and shame from certain foods. They isolate. They end up denying their own malnutrition and ignore their own hunger cues. They have health issues like amenorrhea, low testosterone, bone loss, and cardiovascular disease. And they may use purging behaviors to compensate for unclean eating. So what is the difference between orthorexia and anorexia? With orthorexia, the individuals do not have a distorted body image. There is no obsession with thinness or the ideal weight and shape. There is no anxiety around weight gain. While they may be anxious about the types of food that they put into their body and how it impacts their health, they are not driven by the desire to lose weight or change their shape. Here's another good chart that helps you identify the similarities, differences in anorexia and orthorexia. Orthorexia by itself has a preoccupation with purity of food, an obsession with food quality, no interest in appearance, no fear of being obese, and no predictable gender prevalence. With anorexia, there is a preoccupation with weight loss. They have an obsession with food quantity, and they do have a huge body image disturbance, and 90% of those are women. Where orthorexia and anorexia overlap include preoccupation with food in general, restrictive diets, eating is a primary focus, magical beliefs about the power of food, a sense of superiority over others' eating choices, a need for control, chronic long-term nature, and health-related consequences such as malnutrition and isolation. This concludes the lecture video for orthorexia nervosa. We've discussed some of the characteristics and symptoms of individuals who struggle with orthorexia. We've also discussed how it might compare to anorexia nervosa.